Welcome to episode 73 of Kowalski Analysis. I'm your host, Rob Kowalski, and this is a podcast designed to help you navigate the weight and become the best version of you. So I'm really excited. We got a great guest. I've been working hard getting you guys some really good guests, and I think you're going to enjoy this one tonight. This is someone that I've been connected to on social media for a while, and his name is Sathiya Sam. And before I tell you who he is, do me a favor. And if you can see me and you can hear me okay, drop me a comment. Just let me know if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you're watching it live. Just say hello or hi or hey. And if it's your first time watching, let me know where you're tuning in from, because I always like to know where the new people are. And sometimes we're even able to connect them with others in their area so they can start doing life together. So now Sathiya Sam is a coach and a speaker that helps men live with confidence and integrity. He's actually a recovered porn addict himself. He was a pastor's kid, and he's the creator of something called Deep Clean, and it's a research-based and Bible-backed system for overcoming porn addiction. Deep Clean has helped everyone from college students to medical doctors regain control of their lives and walk in greater levels of freedom. He's married to his lovely wife, Shaloma, and based out of Toronto, Canada. So look, even if porn addiction is not an issue for you, I would suggest you watch this, because I'm sure you know someone in your life that is dealing with this, because the numbers are out of control. But also there's principles that carry over into other areas of your life that can just help, not just with porn addiction, but even other things, food addictions and other things. So just tune in and watch. I want to give a shout out to my sponsor. Thank you to Super Green Solutions and Matthew Krim. They're the largest renewable energy franchise in the country, and they have a location based right in my hometown up the street in a place called Bel Air, Maryland. And everyone's been freaking out about energy prices, the increase lately, and electrical rates and all that. So now's a great time to look at solar and other renewable energy solutions. So you can give Matt a call at 443-961-4396, and you get a $100 dining voucher just for having them come out and do like an energy audit. So, all right, with no further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Mr. Sathiya Sam. Hey, Sathiya, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. You in Toronto?
I am, yes, sir, in Toronto.
How are things there? Are they getting back to normal?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. I got a couple small remnants, but for the most part, it's normal life here again.
Okay, that's good. I know it was a little touch and go there for a while.
It was, yeah. My wife and I actually we were living in Jamaica over the winter, so we dodged most of the mayhem there and came back just in the nick of time.
Wow, must be nice.
It was super nice. Yeah, my wife's Jamaican, so we had a link down there, and all the work I do is online, so we were kind of fortunate to pull it off for about 6 months. It was nice.
I've been to Jamaica a few times. This is in my former life. I went to
Oh,
hedonism
nice.
2 and 3.
You know what's so funny is I've interviewed a couple people for my podcast, obviously like in a similar space, and a bunch of them, I think of two other people who have said the same thing. They're like, "Oh, I love Jamaica. It was a former life. I went to hedonism, but it was still
Yeah,
really fun." Yeah.
I went to hedonism 2 and hedonism 3 on separate trips.
Oh my gosh,
But
that's
yeah,
hilarious.
crazy. And now I need guys like you to help me overcome all the bad mistakes I made when I was younger. No, all right. But before I actually just told everybody who you are. I'm excited to jump into the conversation with you. But before we do, I would like to do a little segment called This or That. And that's going to give you 5 rapid fire questions. And I'm just going to let you answer this or that. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, let's go.
All right. Sweating or shivering?
Sweating.
Sweating, same. I hate being cold. All
Yeah,
right.
me too.
Be embarrassed or be afraid?
Ooh, be afraid. I hate being embarrassed. I don't know why I hate that.
Dude, I hear you. I always had the dream where I would go to school naked. It was horrible. It was
Yeah,
like,
it haunts you, man.
all right, city or countryside?
City for sure. Yeah, I'm a city guy through and through.
Okay, wine or beer?
Beer. Yeah.
Beer. All
I
right.
don't mind wine, but big beer guy, yeah.
All right. Camping or glamping?
Yeah, glamping. Yeah,
Same.
unashamedly a glamper. Yeah.
Same, dude. Same. All right, cool. Well, that was our this or that. Just gives our audience a chance to get to know a little bit about you. So, I wanted to I Googled the stats before our interview because I know there's a lot of women that follow me, and I wanted them to continue watching. And what I found was that 17% of women actually struggled with porn addiction. That's a higher number than I realized. So I want a lot of the women that watch this to keep watching, and I don't want them to assume that this isn't for them, because even if it isn't their thing, what I told them before I brought you in is that I'm sure some of your principles carry over into other areas of life, food addiction, or probably lots of other areas, in addition to the fact that they probably know a man in their life, a friend, a son, brother, or whatever, that is struggling with porn addiction, because it's so prevalent these days.
Yeah.
But before we jump into the conversation, just give everybody a little bit of background on you, like who you are, how why you became passionate about this, how you became a coach, and why you became passionate about this particular subject.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you just said what you said. The stat I know is that for every 2 guys watching, there's a girl watching. So I think, yeah, this is just as prevalent, or it's just as relevant, for men and for women. And the other thing is, there's probably some women listening who have sons, right, or have kids that are going to get exposed to this stuff. So I think it's important across the board. I mentioned that because I got exposed to porn in the computer lab of my Christian school when I was 11 years old. Pastor's kid, really good upbringing, and everything was set up for me to not watch porn, to make good decisions. And yet I still kind of got exposed to it pretty innocently. This was in 2001, Rob. So this is like before broadband internet, really, and certainly before the smartphone and all that.
No filters or anything to block that kind of stuff. What were you Googling that it came up?
So actually a friend came over to me, and he played like a really high level of soccer for, our age. And he was like, hey, one of my teammates told me to look up this website. I won't mention it because unfortunately it's still a pornographic website today, but it's very innocent sounding. Like you would not have suspected anything of the sort. So I just punched it in, and then like lo and behold, there's like these naked women. And I remember this was when like the computer monitors had the big power button on the front. So I was like, we were just trying to jam the button, like trying to not get caught, right? Like I hate being embarrassed, right? So like, it was just that thing of like trying to cover all that up. So it's not like I was addicted overnight. It was just that initial exposure. I hadn't even hit puberty yet. Like there was a part of me that definitely liked what I saw, and another part of me that was just as confused. Sure. And then when I hit puberty, I remembered it. It was in the back of my head. I started to get more curious about sexuality. And I think between conservative Christian upbringing and my parents are both Indian, we weren't talking about sex in the home. So my curiosity just led me to the internet, and that's when I started to watch more regularly. By the time I was in college is when I was addicted. Like I would plan my days around when I was going to watch, and porn was kind of my relief from the stress of pursuing an education, and it was my reward, for all my hard work. Dude, that was sort of the thing I had to look forward to, right?
I hear you. I think in my 20s, I used to do, I was in college, and I would come home and I'd put a VHS tape in, and I'd rub one out after class, 3 times a week. It was my routine.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So you start to plan around it, and it just kind of becomes a normal thing. And I always told myself, like, because of my upbringing, I had a moral conviction about it that I had kind of muted, I guess, in that season. But I always told myself, one day I'll have to quit this stuff, at some point. And that point did come in the middle of my degree. I was studying the sciences in a very anti-God environment. And everything that I had believed up until then was just questioned by really smart people, my professors, and my peers. And so I went on a bit of a soul-searching journey. I found God in the midst of that. Whole nother story for another day. But when I found God, I knew what came with that decision, because I had grown up churched. So I knew I had to start drinking more responsibly. I knew I had to clean up my language, and I had to stop watching porn. And those first 2 things was like no problem. Maybe a week or 2, and I was kind of like back into a good rhythm. But I could not for the life of me shake porn. And I think that was when I realized, okay, this is a major problem. And this was before podcasts. I was probably, I don't know, it was about 10 years ago maybe. So it was just hard to find resources and get the help you need. Everyone was just talking about slapping on an internet filter, talk to somebody, try to get a partner, accountability partner. So I did all that stuff, and it got me into a binge purge cycle, where I would go a couple weeks, but then I would binge, and I would binge really hard. And then I would repent, and I'm sorry, Lord, I'll never do this again. It feels so terrible. And clear my browser history, and then you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, dude. When I was trying to quit, get myself sexually pure, I'd go maybe a week, sometimes 2, and then I'd look, and then I would, I'd jerk off 4 or 5 times in a day, because I was like, at that point, I was like, the guilt's coming anyway. I might as well just, binge. So
Yes,
I totally get it.
Yeah, it was the exact same thing for me. And I think that was when I was like, okay, there has to be more to this equation. I was pretty bound and determined that like there was a way to get free, but I just didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until I started to get into more like matters of the heart, do more like kind of inner healing, did some therapy. Some of the therapy I did wasn't even to get rid of this problem. It was just as we start to dive into the deeper issues, then it was very clear everything was kind of connected. So once I start to get more like healing on an inner level, that's when I start to actually notice a change in my appetites and my behaviors and my decisions. I start to feel a lot more in control of kind of my inner life, and then I was making better decisions. And once I discovered that, I was like, okay, I kind of feel like I owe it to the world to share this because not enough people were talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just made a little decision in my heart, one day when I have this fully figured out, or when I'm at least fully free, I'll do everything in my power to make this kind of stuff accessible to other people. And so February 2016 was when I had my last relapse. December 2018 was when I launched Deep Clean, and that's what I do now. That's kind of my organization that helps men specifically overcome porn addiction.
Love it. Well, you got a huge market out there to people to help.
Yeah,
What is the
yeah,
numbers
big
for
time.
men? How many, like what percentage of men are, I know a very high percentage of them, sure, uh,
Yeah.
indulge in or watch, porn on a regular, but what percentage are addicted, or both stats really?
Yeah, so all stats in this area should come with a grain of salt. I feel like all stats in this day and age should come with a grain of salt. But the main reason it's especially peculiar for porn addiction is because it's such a taboo subject. It's hard to get accurate data, and it's hard to get really like good sized samples so that you know you can actually trust it. Like there's a survey where 70% of Christian men had reported to watching pornography on a regular basis.
Mm,
So that's like really high. There's another study that says it's more like 30 to 40%. So I'm gonna guess it's probably somewhere in the middle, but you have a majority of people who would watch it occasionally, or they don't need it every day. Maybe they don't even need it weekly, but they are watching it with some regularity.
sure.
And
Yeah.
then there's a much smaller percentage. My guess would be probably about 5 to 10% of guys who are actually addicted, where it's like they are planning their days around it,
Right.
and it's like it is a centerpiece of their life and their daily habits.
Yeah. You had said, 30 to 40 and 70 and those are Christian men. So like
Yeah.
non-Christian men, it's almost like they don't even have a reason not to, because they're thinking like, and what would you say to somebody? Because if they're thinking, there's definitely a belief out there where people are like, look, this feels good, it's harmless. Like, what would you say to those people? Because I always like to break things down for people practically. Of
Yeah.
course, we know as Christians the Bible says so, and it's sin and all that, but I like to explain it practically to people, because sometimes,
Yes.
even knowing that it's a sin, until you're like, well, why is this bad for me? Like, what would you say to those people?
Yeah, I think it affects three areas of someone's life. The first is their relationships.
Mm.
So when porn is part of the equation, when you have one partner in a marriage who's watching porn, there's a 56% better chance that they'll get divorced. So it
Wow.
dramatically impacts the divorce rate. It's interesting as well. The relationship satisfaction reports are very high initially when a couple introduces porn. This is now when they're watching it together, or there's at least an acknowledgement and like an acceptance of it. Initially, the relationship satisfaction levels are way higher, and then with time they go lower and lower and lower, and then eventually you see that divorce stat manifest.
Mhm.
So I think on a relational level it's dramatic, a spiritual level. So even if someone's not a Christian, if we were to broaden the definition of spirituality to purpose in life and the values that you live by, we see that when people are watching porn more regularly and they cannot get out of it, um, reported levels of hopelessness are a lot higher. That's like an academic study, no faith
Wow.
bias or anything like that. Maybe the most alarming part of it is actually the impact on somebody personally and especially their physical body. Now, this is specifically for men, this stat, but it would certainly have an application for women as well. In 2001, the reported rate of erectile dysfunction in men under the age of 40 was 5%, which is pretty normal. Like it would be an anomaly, very small percentage of people, because under 40 is like the peak of your sexual life rather. Um,
Damn it.
Today, the
49.
peak. It's still good after 40, but yeah.
Come on, God.
um, the stats today show that in that same demographic, men who are 40 and below, the reported rate of erectile dysfunction is as high as 33%.
Wow.
One in three. And if you kind of chart it, I mean, it's not charted super accurately, But in 2001 is when it started to climb a bit. That was when broadband internet became a thing. In 2007 is where you can start to notice this accelerated pace, and that was with the release of the smartphone. So porn is programming minds to experience arousal through a super stimulus, something that is just beyond normal human experience. And so what's happening is you have guys who are growing up watching porn, thinking nothing of it, thinking it's totally fine, it's totally normal and whatever else. Meanwhile, their brain is actually being conditioned to experience unbelievable levels of stimulation just for them to get an erection.
Sure.
So then when they start to get into a sexual relationship, they can't perform. There's nothing wrong with the partner. The issue is they've conditioned their brain to get something that just is not the same as the kind of stimulation you get when you're with a person. It's still stimulating. It's just not porn, because porn is overproduced and it's giving you all the fantasies and all the narratives that you want in your mind. It's not
Right.
how it works in real life. And so now you're getting this kind of sexual dysfunction that's happening, and the rates are only going to go higher as time goes on.
Wow. And I had heard from, I think it might have been Frank Rich, as I had him on the show maybe twice now. And someone, I think he told me that when you watch porn, it stimulates a part of your brain that's about objects. It's a different
Mhm.
part of your brain than like a person. So this
Yeah.
is why when you actually have a person, for whatever reason, things don't work the way they're supposed to, because you know, you start looking at people as objects, sex objects, specifically women, right?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, 100%. People who are addicted to porn are some of the most selfish lovers,
Hmm.
because when you are objectifying someone, it is purely about your pleasure.
Right.
And the best sex is always when you come in with a heart to serve. You have the other person in mind. And so, yeah, it's detrimental. I mean, the effects are widespread.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, anytime that I've masturbated, it's always me doing something for myself. Like
Yeah.
it's not me making love, let's say, right?
No,
It's not me
no.
serving, it's not me serving that other person that, in my mind that would, get me off. And so I can totally see how that's true. So when you were dealing with this, like addiction, how bad did it get for you? Where it was like, how was it negatively impacting your life?
Yeah, okay, so a couple of things. The first thing is, I mentioned it already, I was planning my days around it. So that's a pretty telltale sign that you're really dependent on something, is when you start to
Mhm.
plan around it.
Yeah.
Another really good indicator of addiction is you are engaging in riskier behaviors to get your hit. So maybe one of the lowest moments for me was I was still living with my parents, I think, at the time, and I was really, really tempted one day. And this was before I think I had my own personal device.
Mm.
So our computer was in, a separate room. It was late at night, and my brother was sleeping in the computer room because it was in the basement and it was in the summer, and his bedroom was super hot upstairs or whatever. So he wants to sleep in the basement. So he's laid out on the bed, and I just could not control myself. So I go into the room, and I'm looking to kind of see if he's awake, and he's not. So I went on the computer and I watched, obviously like looking over my shoulder, to see if he'd wake up or that kind of thing. But that was one of the things in hindsight where I'm like, wow, I was completely oblivious to how bad it was. But that kind of risky behavior, very telltale sign, that there's an addiction there. And then I think the other part is just the negative impact it has relationally,
Hmm.
like whether it's a disqualification because it's like I don't feel like I'm good enough to be with somebody when I have this problem or I've had this
Right.
problem, or it's just the fact that, like we were just discussing, porn does start to rewire the way you interact with the I would say the sex you're attracted to, and I think the issue is that it then starts to impede your regular social skills.
Hmm.
And so people are experiencing less capacity for intimate, meaningful relationship because they're basically training themselves to experience intimacy through something that's purely physical, purely objectifying, and really purely sexual. And
Right.
so it really started to take its toll for me there as well. I was very happy being single. I actually really enjoyed being single, and that was separate from my struggle. But I did notice that even when there was interest, my ability to engage at a really deep, meaningful level was almost completely shot because of my porn addiction.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I had Dave Asprey on the podcast a while back, and he talked a lot about the benefits of not ejaculating too often, semen
Mhm.
retention. No fap is a big thing right now. So, is that something that because that would be a motivator, obviously, just on a purely surface level, it's like living longer and all that. Is that something that you believe in too? Like that it's
Yeah.
going to extend your life and just it's healthy to just not to ejaculate? Because I actually Googled it. I was researching and there's conflicting views. Some people believe it's really healthy to ejaculate, very regularly, and then some believe that any more than once a week and you're gonna cut your life shorter.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't researched it a ton. It's not a huge part of my process, but I think I always try to see it through a biblical lens. You think about why that function even exists in your body,
Right.
which would be for sexual intimacy to an effect, and then I would say to procreation.
Creation, sure.
Um, I think the people who are making the argument that you need to ejaculate regularly or that kind of thing, that I have a really hard time with. Like even if you look at the stats among marriages, like how often you need to have sex to have like a really healthy, fulfilling marriage. It's once a week. That's like the staple. And if it's twice a week or 3 times a week, the improvement in relationship satisfaction is almost negligible. Like it's very,
Mhm.
very small. So I think people who are trying to justify ejaculating very regularly, I'm like, you're probably more addicted to it than you realize. Like your
Mhm.
body's probably very dependent on the release. Um, but at the same time, the retention side of it, I mean, again, I believe that sex is safe for marriage. And I think in the marriage
Mhm.
context, you're having sex a couple times a week or whatever. I think that's really healthy. But the retention side of it, there are some stats that really show when somebody is not in a committed relationship and they retain, there is an impact on their creative energy, their overall energy, and everything else. But I think God has wired us for long-term committed sexual relationships, which we call marriage. And
Right.
so I think when you're experiencing ejaculation in that context, I mean, enjoy your marriage. Don't try to put a limit on it or a cap on it because of
Right.
a study.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
he talked about, uh, and I think even John Gray. I had John Gray, the author of Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, which I should introduce him to you. He'd be a great guest for you.
I
And
love
he
that.
talked about basically the same thing, which like you can have sex as frequently as you like, but just don't ejaculate. And I was like, really? Well,
Wow.
I'm like, that's like
Interesting.
chewing food and spitting it out. I'm like, no, I want to swallow it. um, but no, Dave Asprey talked about like all the benefits and just the discipline and different things that come along with it. But he
Yeah.
specifically mentioned it like a post ejaculation hangover, like that
Mm.
there were studies that showed that after you ejaculate, you don't you basically you almost get depressed a little bit. Um, Now I don't I'm trying to remember when I was very sexually active that was true. I'm not 100% sure, but he definitely sounded very convincing when he talked about it,
Yeah.
and that supposedly it was adversely affected your mood and your ability to cope with like stimulants basically. And I do know like for porn, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when you engage in porn, well, porn definitely leads to depression. And what I read was is because you get this what is it? You basically get a flood of dopamine,
Dopamine
right?
hit. Yeah.
So then you get, because it's so abnormal, that you have less dopamine receptors because your brain is trying to regulate,
Hmm.
and then now it takes more just like everyday things to get you to just even like a level state. Is that pretty accurate? Hey, Rob Kowalski here. When I first got serious about living intentionally and becoming a better version of myself, I found a major shortage of things to do and people to do them with. And it was the loneliness and boredom that led me to starting CityFam. So I just want to take a moment right now and encourage you to go over and join the CityFam Facebook community. It's a free Facebook group, and in it you'll find purpose-driven people from all over the world that want to enjoy life to the fullest. You can search it on Facebook, or you can go to www.friendswithbetterbenefits.com and it'll take you right there. While I'm mentioning it, if you're single, searching for real love before sex, as I like to say, I want to encourage you to join the Waiting Works community. That's another free Facebook group I put together designed to help people wait well, date well, and ultimately hit the mark in life and love. You can go to www.reallovewaits.com and I'll see you over there. Now back to the episode. I probably did a crappy job of explaining it, but that was what
That
I read.
that is accurate, and that is the mechanism for addiction formation and addiction development. So, some guys who come to me are enrolling for my program because they always thought, yeah, I'm watching a bit of porn. I know I should stop, but it's fine. At least I'm not doing what so and so has done. Like I've heard the awful stories. At least I'm not doing that. But then they cross that line. They buy sex. They go to a strip club. They start watching content they thought they'd never watch. And the reason is because of that neurological mechanism that you just mentioned, which is that their brain is no longer it's no longer feeling satiated by the level of dopamine secretion that's coming from just watching, softcore content or even hardcore content. So then they start to get curious. And curiosity, or not curiosity, novelty enhances pleasure. So when you experience something for the first time, even if it's really weird and kind of twisted,
Dude.
there's an arousal element to that, right?
Yeah, I had a friend and he was not gay, and he told me he was watching so much porn he started to have to watch gay porn to get off, and he
Exactly.
wasn't gay. And I'm
Yes.
like, and I hear that that's actually somewhat common.
Very common. There is a shocking number of Christian men who experience same-sex attraction or are heterosexual and heterosexual attracted, but watch gay porn. And
Wow.
this is a huge part of it. Is the novelty intensifies the experience, it enhances the pleasure of it, and it causes people to go down paths they never thought in a million years they would go down.
Man, that's crazy. So, what are the common like reasons that people use porn? I mean, I know I'm trying to think of my own life. Like, it's probably escape. What are the other reasons?
Yeah, I mean, escape is a huge part of it. Porn is incredibly pleasurable, right? So pleasure is a great medicine for pain, discomfort, any kind of negative thing we feel. So I would say pain is probably the greatest driving force of all addiction, porn or something else. The other thing is loneliness and disconnection. It is amazing how many guys
Mm,
that are in our program are just lonely. Like they just feel alone in general. They certainly
mm,
feel alone in their struggle and their desire to get free. So a lot of what we do is very communal. It's all group oriented. We have a big online platform for guys to be able to support each other in kind of a support network. So all of that stuff really factors in. And I think I would probably say those are the two driving forces. The way I phrase it is that porn is fast food intimacy. It gives you the illusion of getting that need met, but it just leaves you hungrier when all is said and done. And so I
right.
think a lot of people are going there for that sense of connection, a sense of purpose, a sense of acceptance from another person. And obviously, it maybe temporarily gives that illusion or that feeling of it, but it just creates worse problems later. So I think pain, intimacy, those are probably the two driving forces.
That's good. So, talk about the deep clean system. Is that something that you came up with and you invented?
It is, yeah, yeah. So it's my methodology. It's really based on my own recovery story. I love the fundamentals of whatever it is that I'm learning about. I think there's always fundamentals, and you said it at the top. Like what we do is principally based, which is why the women who are listening can apply what we teach and get breakthroughs as well. It's not specific to men, but yeah, the deep clean system basically is predicated on three pillars, and each pillar comes with a mantra. So the first pillar is self-awareness. And the mantra there is if you are not aware, it cannot be repaired. So there's often things going on underneath the surface that are causing somebody to watch porn, like we were just touching on. And unless the guy or the girl becomes aware of what those things are, they have very little hope of actually making a long-term recovery. You have to be aware of what's really going on inside. The second pillar is healing of the heart. And the idea there is, or the mantra there is, he who is most vulnerable heals the quickest.
Mm,
So starting to just be honest about parts of your past, about the struggles that are within, and learning to find safe places to experience vulnerability, to just be seen, known, and understood goes a really long way for the human heart. And obviously, part of that includes the inner healing components I mentioned, trauma recovery, all that kind of stuff. And the third tenet is identity formation, and really finding your sense of self. The mantra there is I would rather be 80%, sorry, I would rather be 100% my true self and rejected than 80% my true self and accepted.
mm.
And it's teaching our guys to be radically their true authentic selves, just to be who they are without apology. And it takes a lot of time to get to that level of confidence within yourself. But we find that when guys are really pursuing that, they're doing it in a healthy community, they're getting some coaching and guidance along the way. They start to make very different decisions. So
That's
that's
awesome.
sort of the system. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a real spiritual principle to that. Like the Bible talks about confess your sins, right? One to another
hmm
that you might be healed. I feel like it's almost like God won't let you get over it until you are able to be honest about it?
Yes, big time. Yeah, and there is something really powerful about opening up to people who get it or people who want to help you, that kind of thing. Because I think that scripture has been like people have experienced the other side of it as well, where they've opened up to their pastor that they might be healed, and then their pastor just doesn't know how to handle it or
Right.
handles it poorly. And then they're like, oh, dang, I thought that was going to help. What the heck happened? So I think, yeah, there's huge truth to that. But there's a bit of an art to it, or there's some principles that come with it.
Yeah. What is the most common, like when you talked about healing, what is the most common wounds that people have to heal from? Is it childhood stuff or, what is it?
Yeah, we emphasize parent relationships quite a bit. We actually we'll have the guy do work concerning the parent of the gender that they're attracted to as a starting point. It's not like a rule of thumb, but like, so for me in my recovery journey, I actually still remember I was making some progress, and I think I was in a session with a therapist, or maybe it was a sozo session, or I forget what it was. It was something where we were doing some inner work. And this guy started poking around, asking about my relationship with my mom. And I felt all these guards come up, like just stay away kind of thing. And had the presence of mind to realize, okay, no, I'm not going to be guarded because I paid money to get the session done. I'm going to be honest. And as we're talking, I'm just realizing, all of a sudden, like, you have those moments where 1,000 dots all connect at once. And I just realized I've grown up a majority of my life feeling neglected by my mom.
Hmm.
My mom was always present, took care of me, was very supportive, very encouraging. Like, I didn't have anything obvious to explain that kind of feeling. But when I dug into it, I realized my mom is a shy personality. She's a little bit more reserved. And she really didn't express love the way that I needed it as a kid. And so I grew up with this just lingering sense of neglect.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, everything made sense. It was like, well, if I'm not getting my like maternal affection, then it kind of makes sense that I would start probably looking in other places for it. That was just chasing girls innocently, when I was a teenager, but obviously developed into this porn addiction.
Hmm.
So identifying that, processing some of the pain of it, just calling it what it was, and then reaching that place of forgiveness was super impactful for me. And that's the kind of process that we walk our guys through as well. It's trying to just find any loose threads that God's highlighting, or maybe that they're aware of, and then just working through it. It's labeling the pain, acknowledging the dynamics for what they were, and then reaching that place of forgiveness and kind of accepting it. Again, not justifying somebody's terrible actions. Like in my case, my mom didn't do anything malicious, but in some people's cases they did. We're not justifying that necessarily, but we're just saying, hey, we're not going to let that impact us anymore. So that would be probably the most staple part of the healing journey. There's other elements to it, but that's the main
That's
one.
awesome, man. Yeah, as you were talking, I'm just thinking about my own relationship with my mom. She's great. But she was pregnant with me at 14,
Yeah.
always working, like I raised myself, and
Yeah.
I was definitely girl crazy at the time. As soon as I hit puberty, I was, my for the most of the decisions I made, up until met Jesus, was about what could get me more girls.
Right.
And like I've wondered what that was. Is I wanted to be a stripper from the time I was 15 years old because of women, and that's not normal.
Right.
And I wondered where that came from. I could totally see how what you're saying is true. Like I was exposed to a pretty sexualized environment, my mom's friends and different things that I saw growing up. But yeah, I could see how that desire for female attention could lead to that. So
Yeah,
you
it
do
was
it.
it was a oh, sorry,
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say it was a big one for me. And I think we, like I said, we have guys in our program who have same-sex attraction, and when they start digging into the relationships with their dads, they often find very similar things. It's usually a lack of attention, a
Mhm.
lack of affection or affirmation. It's something along those lines.
Right.
And it really seems to put people back in a place of control with their sexuality when they can start working through those wounds. So
Do you
yeah.
do anything with fasting, like, or delayed gratification in your
Um,
program?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. Like, we highly encourage any practice like that that's going to enhance your delayed gratification,
Mhm.
your ability to delay. And I personally fast 24 hours every week. I've been doing that for 6 or 7 years. I love it. Um, but
You sundown to
if
sundown?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
Yep.
But it's not a part of our program. I like it when those things happen organically. Like the three pillars, those are the things that we focus on. That's where we drive all of our attention. And then, yeah, we've had guys do challenges and do fasts and all kinds of stuff within, but that part's a bit more organic.
Okay. How about vision? So that's something that I'm a pretty big advocate for, because for me, like, what really led to a lot of the changes that I made was I started meeting with a life coach, and she helped me get clear about a vision for my life. How
Yeah.
about that? Is that something that you help your guys with?
Oh yeah, dude, that's monumental. So we have a paradigm called the principle stack, and we call it sort of like the bedrock of recovery. So the five principles are the first one is control, identifying what you can and can't control. The second is taking responsibility for what you can control, and the third principle is vision.
Mm.
And yeah, it's purely based on that proverb. It's Proverbs 29:18, right? Where there's no vision, the
People
people
perish.
cast off restraint or they perish. Yeah. And so that's the idea. I think a lot of guys come into the program with no vision because they've lost hope, right? Like
Mm.
they have that vision somewhere in there. It's just buried under the shame and the remorse and the hopelessness. So
Yeah.
we actually do that pretty early on in the program is we're like, hey, create a vision board. Let's start talking about why you actually want to get free and what's on the other side of this because
Right.
you need to have that incentive. It's recovery is not an easy journey,
Yeah.
and you know on the easy days you maybe don't necessarily need to be reminded of your vision. It's still good practice, but it's especially useful on those days when urges are high. You don't feel like you're making the progress you want to make. You have a setback. That stuff really keeps you grounded and
Yeah.
keeps you focused. And so for me, you know, you have your book in the background there, Why Waiting Works. So for me, when I was, I don't know, mid-20s, one of my mentors said, hey, I don't know if anyone's told you this, but marriage is a magnifier. A lot of guys who have sexual problems with, you know, pornography or whatever, they think they're going to get married and their problems are going to go away because they're going to start having sex and their desire for porn will go away. He's like, it doesn't work that way, and that really woke me up. And so I actually purposed in my heart, I prayed, God, whoever my future wife is, just keep her from me until I have this thing figured out. It was a huge incentive for me to kind of get free because I did want to get married and start a
Hmm.
family one day and all of that. And that was really helpful for me actually on some of those hard days, just to remind myself of no, like my future family, my future wife, I don't want to have a dysfunctional marriage and everything else. And God's really cool, man, because February 2016 was the last time I watched porn. And I met Shaloma, who's now my wife, in November 2016, about 9 months later. And so I think
Yeah.
that stuff
Awesome.
goes a long way, man. Having that vision is huge.
Yeah. I know for me, like, so many times, I got very clear about my vision and it was so far beyond anything that I could achieve on my own. And I knew I needed
Mm.
God's help. So here I'm like, praying and I'm like, you know how it is. If you're living in disobedience, you don't even feel like your prayers are going anywhere. You're like, why would God answer my prayers if I'm living like this? So I would actually sign these covenants with God where I was an article I read where I would be like, God, I'm not going to look lustfully at a woman for intentionally hold a thought in my head or look at porn for x amount of time. Sometimes I'd sign up for that, and initially it was like a few days or a week, and then it was months. And I would be like, God, I need you to help me, and if I keep this promise, this covenant with you, I want you to bless me greatly and open doors that no man can shut. But if I don't keep it, I want you to punish me severely. And I would sign
Wow.
it. And it was it's a lot of times I'd go to bed depressed where I would have jerked off, but I was like, I'm like, I just invited God to punish me. I'm like, I ain't gonna do. Now I won't say I was perfect every time, but it did help me break some strongholds in my life. And I always go back to that verse in I don't remember what book it's in, but it talks about sexual immorality, and he
Hmm.
compares it to the story of Jacob and Esau. He says, let no one be sexually immoral or godless like Esau, who traded his birthright for a bowl of stew. And I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of um, confusion around sexual immorality because we don't really realize the impact that we're having on ourselves and our long-term goals. But if you're out there, you know, being sexually immoral, whether that's sleeping with someone that's not your wife, husband or wife, depending on what sex you are, I guess, or just, rubbing one out in privacy, you're trading your birthright, which I believe he's saying is basically like your purpose for being on this earth, and maybe your soulmate for
Mm.
a bowl of stew, which is something very temporary. And Esau was hungry 3 hours later. He traded his birthright for that thing. It's like
Yeah.
that's what we're doing when we're sexually immoral, and but it's so hard. I mean, like I know in my own life, I've been single and sex free for like outside of two isolated incidents for the past 10 years. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, God, what the hell? Like, this is not fair. It's so difficult to do, you know, but that's the cross to bear, right?
Yeah, yeah. The I think the thing that you touched on, which is really important, it's not just that you don't realize the implications down the road. It's that people forget the compounding effect of small positive decisions over long periods of time. So like in our principle stack, right, we talked about those first three. The last two are delayed gratification and then consistency compounds. So like the fasting example is great, a great one. So I've been fasting 24 hours weekly for 6, 7 years. That the first couple times I did it, I hated it, because it was like I was just all I could think about was how hungry I was. And then I continued to read the Bible and I realized that actually generally people are fasting to have an encounter with God, to get a breakthrough, or to fortify the relationship that's already there, whether it's going well or not. And when I started to make that my focus, fasting became something I looked forward to. I would always partner it with an area in my life where maybe I need some breakthrough or revelation or whatever it might be. And over time now, over 7 years, I can point back to a lot of the miracles in my life, some of the increase that's happened, some of the things that have gone my way, and say, I fasted over those things. Like I
Right.
fasted over them.
Yeah.
And again, just a very small thing that adds up over time. And I think a lot of people, like in a moment of temptation, you're tempted to rub one out. You're tempted to go, text that number that you shouldn't, or go on that site you shouldn't, whatever it is. Our brains tell us that it's this or that. It's like, well, I either don't do it or I do it. But actually, it's much more about the ripples. It's more about the cascade than anything else.
Right.
And so the more conscious you are in your decision making, just in general, of the cascading effect of long term, not just putting out the fire, but asking yourself, is this going to prevent future fires, or what's the implication down the road? That goes a really long way to maturing as an individual, and certainly to gaining some control of your sexual impulses. So I think that's what it's about more than anything. And the incredible thing is the compounding effect. As you start to do that regularly, then you really start to generate a lot of unstoppable momentum in the right direction.
Great book. You ever read Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect?
Yes, I think I've done the Blinkist, like where you get like the 15-minute summation of it. I haven't actually read through it,
Okay.
but I know the gist of it, if that makes sense.
One of my favorite books. So anyway, I want you to tell people where they can find you on social media, where they can buy your book,
Yeah.
get your program, all that. Actually, before we do that, why don't you do this? If anybody's out there that's struggling with porn addiction, I would love for you to pray for them.
Yeah.
Do you
Let's
mind
do
leading
that.
us in a prayer?
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it. Father, thank you so much for our time together. Lord, we thank you that you've given us instructions about sexual morality and holiness and purity and everything we were discussing about, not to make life a challenge, but you actually had our best interest in mind. And to make it even better, God, you are actually alongside us every step of the way, helping us walk into the things that you've mandated for us. And so I pray for those who are listening who maybe are feeling abandoned, who are feeling hopeless, who are feeling alone in this struggle, and maybe wondering if there's a way out. God, we thank you that there is a way out and that you are that way. And I pray that you would reveal yourself to them. God, I pray that you would incite even just a spark of hope, a glimmer from today's episode, that this can be done. If it can happen for us, it can happen for them as well. And not because we're so great, not even because the system is so great, but Lord, because this is something that you've called us to, and that's something that you're empowering us to do. And I pray for radical courage for the person who's maybe never reached out, never told anyone about it, radical courage to take that first step. And for the person who maybe is stuck in that insanity cycle, just doing the same thing, hoping for a different result. God, I pray for radical courage there as well, to try something different, to break out of that cycle, and to walk into the greater levels of freedom that you have called them to. Lord, and lastly, I pray for the destinies, the dreams, and the desires that are on hold. Lord, we call those things forth in your name. We call them forth into reality, and let porn, sex addiction, and anything else that is obstructing it, let those be removed and obliterated in Jesus' name, so that these guys and these girls can walk fully in the things that you've called them to. We pray this all in your holy name, God. Amen.
Amen. That was great. Really
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Sathiya.
Thanks, man.
So
Yeah,
tell
my
everyone
pleasure.
where they can get the book and the program and find you on social media.
Yeah, so there's two ways I'd love your audience to connect. We have a daily podcast called Unleash the Man Within. It does target men, but honestly, our listenership among women is increasing because it's all principally based. There's an application there, so that's on all major platforms. My book is called The Last Relapse, and I actually have a free copy of that available to anybody who goes to thelastrelapsebook.com. And so you can get a digital copy there, or if people want a physical copy, it's available on all major platforms. But thelastrelapsebook.com,
Mhm.
that's the URL to go to if people want a free copy of it. My gift to you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put those links in the show notes so everybody can find you. And then you're on social media as Sathiya Sam under Instagram.
Yeah, Sathiya Me Sam. It's a bit of a complex handle there,
Okay.
but I am, and I'm posting on social media every day as well. So it's another place for people to get some content to help them in their recovery.
Awesome, man. This was great. Really appreciate you coming on.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Sathiya.